The rest of Deicide's camp had re-emerged amongst the cliques of those guarding politicians and socialites of the districts. Hellmouth and the Great White dragged themselves out of the darkness of the stairwell. Their skids were covered in blood and coolant fluid. Deicide watched as they wiped blood from their sneering lips. He looked around at everyone's graven faces. The twins, Destra and Sinestra, looked more angry than rattled. They had seen more than a few assassination attempts. The civilian children of an eater still held their parents' qualities in some form, though latent and dull. Deicide had become annoyed that the abyss had wrapped him entirely except his eyes. Deicide pulled the abyss away from the bottom of his face as he approached the twins. She still loomed over him, creating a hooded, black cloak. "President Holcomb was assassinated," Destra said. "There was a message. Puppets corrupt the word of the wolf god. Speak to us no longer through your figureheads, and your bastard princes and princesses can never defeat us all. Our quarrel is not with you, rightful eater, but with fate. Heed the words of the queen, and we will war no longer. Ignore us, and those of us that have bred into your family will destroy you from within." The twins gave a quick glance to each other before looking at Deicide, their minds working backward to uncover any radicalism they had seen within the ranks. Deicide's face began to mimic the twins. He too was wondering who amongst them could possibly be a traitor. Those humans taken from the dregs of the district had been screened thoroughly and carefully monitored. Those positions that held any real power were held by plank owners and children of those who had been a part of the Yolopau's original crew and that of his military. Nearly a third of Deicide's officers were his own children or grandchildren through Knott's revival program or natural birth. No, this threat was meant only to distract. If they had no qualms with Deicide, then what could they possibly be after? When a quick muster had taken place, Hellmouth gave the signal to move out. But before everyone could pile in the vehicles, an explosion went off underneath them, sending the cars into a long free fall. With nothing for the abyss to grasp onto, the cars slammed hard into the ground below, cracking the chassis in half. The car slammed into the maintenance decks below. Deicide burst from the car, using the sovereignty of his kill box to peel back the now twisted armored vehicle. There was dark blood all around. Screams and violent fits of coughing stuffed his ears. Heavy machine gun fire laced its way across the scene. A flaming tongue licked rapidly from the barrel, its wielder only illuminated in sputters. Deicide barely flinched as the large caliber bullets were absorbed by the abyss. A cyborg emerged, only to have his cycling innards torn out by Deicide's bare hand. It collapsed in a haze of ozone. Many more broke through the dust and smoke. Their focus only seemed to be aimed at Deicide. The abyss found her way to their spines and instantly deboned them like fish. In the madness surrounding this bedlam, Deicide thought he had heard Hellmouth shout something from above. "Get!" she said. Then Deicide felt the most intense physical pressure of his life, as if the pretender god were reaching into him to take back the soul which he had loaned him. He watched as a shell of an enormous size had breached through the abyss's black dome, which did nothing to shield him, and soared into his kill box. He was unable to control the object, as it seemed to be warping reality itself, passing through multiple dimensions to slow systems used to track and defend against it. An EP rifle. Deicide's body was nearly cleaved in half, and he was sent whirling before crashing into the wall behind. Immediately, he was unconscious, and the cyborg swarmed his battered body. When Deicide was woken by the pain and violent jostling, he was being carried by a group of rebel cyborgs. He struggled to move, but his body needed a few more moments to repair itself. Then he would have his revenge. The tunnel they were running down was barely lit, covered in mildew and grime. Cables that had probably been hung thousands of years ago were still clamped neatly into their brackets. He waited impatiently as he watched his muscles sew themselves back around his bones. The round had missed his head, but it struck his umbilical units that connected to the base of his spine. It would grow back, but it was taking far too long. He was paralyzed until it had. The abyss was the size of a small dog. Her mass was only an inkling of what she once was. She had used nearly all of her girth to halt the negation reaction the shell had begun. She had recovered some of the pure vestige leaking from Deicide's umbilicals, but had to maintain most of their severed tips to stop the man from bleeding out. The umbilicals, now severed from their connection with the life support systems, were now major arteries that could not be closed on their own. The abyss scurried under what was left of his uniform top, knowing she was unable to aid him. Deicide could feel a burning sensation in his limbs again, letting him know that his body was almost whole. He heard someone screaming, "Ant!" and he yelled back, causing the cyborgs to quicken their pace. Hellmouth, enraged at the loss of a pup, would no doubt be leading this murderous charge. He knew it would only take his eaters a moment to sprint to their position. Even the lightest of cyborgs would lose to one of Deicide's enhanced eaters in a foot race. When he had regained control of his limbs, he spun just as the cyborgs hurled him into a tunnel running perpendicular to the one they were in. But instead of hitting some type of floor after an endless moment, Deicide continued falling into the darkness.